The slap landed before I even knew her hand was coming. My glasses flew across the polished marble floor, shattering into 100 glittering shards under the chandelier's light. 180 guests froze mid. The sting on my cheek burned, but the ache in my chest, that was unbearable. It was my own daughter-in-law Brooke, who had just struck me on her wedding night because I refused to hand over the keys to my home. "An old woman like you doesn't need that much space," she screamed, her white dress glowing under the ballroom lights as if cruelty itself had been crowned queen. And there I stood, trembling, humiliated, my son watching with his eyes glued to the floor. That night, in front of everyone, I realized this wasn't just a slap. This was the spark that would ignite everything I had kept hidden for decades. The ballroom had gone so quiet. I could hear the clink of ice melting in untouched glasses. I bent down, my knees stiff, to gather the broken pieces of my glasses. They glittered like sharp little stars against the cold marble, each shard reminding me that something inside me had also shattered. My hands trembled, not from age, but from rage I had swallowed for far too long. People whispered, shifting in their chairs, avoiding my eyes as if humiliation were contagious. Some looked pitying, others uncomfortable, but not a single hand reached out to help. The chandeliers above cast golden light on their jeweled gowns and tuxedos, while I crouched on the floor like a beggar at my own son's wedding. Brooke stood tall, her wedding dress a cascade of white silk, her lips curved in a victorious sneer. "That's what you get for being selfish," she spat, adjusting her veil as though the scene had merely wrinkled her perfection. "Noah and I need that condo. We deserve privacy for our new life. You should be grateful we're even willing to take care of it." Her words dripped with venom, every syllable echoing through the vaulted ceiling like a curse. And then my eyes found my son, Noah, my boy who once cried in my lap after scraping his knee, the boy I raised on late-night shifts and cold dinners so he could have a better future. He stood still, shoulders hunched, eyes locked on the floor, as if by staring hard enough he could disappear. Not one word of defense, not even a glance of recognition. To him, in that moment, I was invisible. My chest tightened, the sting on my cheek throbbed, but the pain was far deeper. It was the realization that my son had chosen silence over me. Silence, in front of 180 people. Silence, when his wife had turned me into nothing more than a spectacle. I rose slowly, forcing my body to straighten, though my heart felt crushed under the weight of betrayal. Tears blurred the chandeliers into halos, but inside, something hard was forming like steel cooling into shape. For decades, I had lived humbly, keeping secrets even my own son didn't know. Secrets I prayed would never see daylight. But that slap, that public humiliation, it was the final straw that as I turned toward the exit, whispers followed me like a toxic fog. "She looks so fragile. The bride is right. She can't take care of herself anymore." Each phrase was acid on my skin, but also fuel to the fire inside me. I clutched the worn black purse I'd carried for years, not because I couldn't afford a new one, but because I valued practicality over vanity. Inside was a phone number I hadn't dialed in months, and tonight, under the golden lights of this cursed ballroom, I knew I would make that call, because this wasn't just about dignity anymore. It was about survival. And when I walked out into the cool night air, I whispered to myself, "They think they've broken me, but they have no idea who I really am." Asterisk, asterisk. The night air outside the Harborcrest ballroom was sharp with the salty temps of the bay. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders, but no fabric could warm the cold that had taken root inside me. The glow of the chandelier spilled onto the pavement, and I saw my reflection faintly in the glass doors. An old woman, hair silver under the streetlight, eyes wet with shame. That's all they saw. That's all Brooke ever wanted them to see. But appearances are deceiving. For years, I had allowed the world to believe I was just Margaret Ellis, a 70-year-old widow clinging to her modest condo, working part-time in a flower shop, driving a decade-old Camry, a woman worn down by age and circumstance. What they never knew, what I never allowed anyone to know, was the truth I carried, like a locked chest in my heart. My husband Robert hadn't been just another office worker lost in the crowd. He had been brilliant, a quiet investor who built wealth brick by brick, deal by deal. Always in silence, always in shadows. He believed in one unshakable rule: visible wealth attracts danger, invisible wealth gives freedom. So we lived simply, No designer gowns, no flashy vacations, no sprawling mansions, just a modest home, second-hand furniture, and a bank balance that could have bought out half the city. Even Noah never knew. We thought we were protecting him from greed, from the ugly way money distorts love. But greed has a way of finding you anyway. As I walked to the parking lot, I could still hear laughter spilling from the ballroom windows, Brooke's high-pitched cackle, the shallow applause of her friends. They thought they had cornered me. They thought the slap was the final humiliation that would crush me into surrender. They were wrong. I slid into my old Camry, the cracked leather seat creaking beneath me. My purse felt heavier than usual, though it only carried a few things: a wallet, a rosary, and my phone. I pulled it out, my thumb hovering over the contact I hadn't touched in nearly a year. Daniel Price, the man who had quietly guarded my secrets, who knew the weight of the empire Robert and I had built. My voice trembled when the call connected, but beneath the tremor was a steel I hadn't felt in decades. Daniel, it's Maggie. I need you to come. Tonight. Bring the documents. A pause on the other end, then his steady voice. Are you sure, Margaret? Once we do this, there's no turning back. I looked back at the golden ballroom one last time, at the glittering illusion where my son and his bride still basked in their false victory. I've never been more certain, I whispered. Tonight, they meet the real me. I ended the call, my heart pounding like war drums. For 70 years, I had lived behind a mask of humility. Tonight, for the first time, that mask was coming off, and when it did, they would learn the one truth Brooke never understood. Kindness is not weakness, it's patience, and mine had just run out. Asterisk, asterisk, the hum of my car's engine filled the silence as I sat in the parking lot, headlights dimmed. I leaned back against the seat, my breath fogging the glass, and memories began to creep in like ghosts I could no longer keep at bay. That it hadn't started with the slap. No, Brooke's venom had been dripping into my life for years, a slow poison that wore down even the strongest spirit. I remembered the first evening she visited my condo. Noah had beamed with pride, introducing her as the woman who had changed his life. Brooke's heels clicked across my worn hardwood floors, her eyes sweeping the living room as though she were evaluating a crime scene. Cozy, she murmured, her glossy smile failing to hide the disdain in her eyes as they lingered on the faded curtains and second-hand furniture. That smile, God, that smile was the mask she wore so well. Sweet to Noah, sweet to strangers, but to me, it was a knife wrapped in velvet. Over time, the barbs grew sharper. A woman your age really shouldn't be driving something that old. Maggie, she said one afternoon, tapping her manicured nail against the cracked dashboard of my Camry. Or at family dinners, don't you ever get tired of wearing the same sweaters? You'd look so much younger in something modern. Each phrase seemed harmless on the surface, but I knew what she was doing, chipping away at me, making me doubt myself, turning Noah's eyes toward her version of reality where I was nothing more than a burden. The worst came 3 months before the wedding. Over roast chicken and candlelight, Brooke leaned across the table, her voice dripping with false concern. At your age, Maggie, maintaining that big condo must be exhausting. Noah and I have been thinking it might be best for everyone if you moved into a senior community, somewhere safe, with medical staff, with friends your own age. Her parents nodded like puppets beside her, their polished smiles gleaming in the light. And Noah, my Noah, sat silent, his fork tracing circles in his mashed potatoes, unable or unwilling to defend me. I forced a smile that night, but inside I felt myself cracking, not because I believed her lies, but because I saw the way my son's shoulders leaned toward her, as if her words had more weight than decades of love I had poured into him. The final insult had come only days ago. I caught her on the phone in my kitchen, her voice hushed but clear. Yes, Mom, the apartment is perfect. Once she's out, we'll live there until we can upgrade. She's so naive she probably thank us for helping her move. The words cut deeper than any slap ever could. They weren't just plotting to take my home, they were laughing at me while doing it. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles pale in the glow of the dashboard. Every memory was fuel, every insult another spark to the fire that had been building inside me. Brooke thought she was playing chess with an old woman too fragile to fight back. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her every move, memorizing her every lie. And soon, I would make my own move. The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the lace curtains of my condo. I sat at the kitchen table, the steam from my chipped mug of coffee rising like ghosts, and stared at the phone resting before me. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the weight of the decision I was about to make. For years, I had convinced myself ignorance was safer, that if I didn't look too closely, I could still believe Noah had chosen love over convenience. But last night, the slap, the laughter, the whispered schemes burned away the last of that illusion. If Brooke's poison had seeped into my son's veins, I needed proof. Proof of just how deep her claws had sunk. I dialed Daniel Price, my late husband's trusted advisor, a man who had guarded our secrets with the care of a vault. His voice was calm, steady, the same as it had been through market crashes and legal storms. "Margaret," he said, "I thought you might call. I need you to dig," I whispered, lowering my voice, though the condo was empty. "Everything, their debts, their assets, their lies. I want to know exactly what game they're playing." There was a pause, heavy but understanding. "Are you prepared for the answers? Sometimes the truth is sharper than the blade." "I've lived in shadows too long," I replied. "It's time to see what's lurking there." Within days, Daniel delivered a thick folder bound in leather, its weight landing on my dining table with the finality of a gavel. My fingers hesitated at the edge of the cover. Inside was either salvation or devastation, but either way, I could no longer pretend. I opened it. The numbers screamed louder than words ever could. Credit card debts stacked like falling bricks, over $80,000 in unpaid balances. Eviction notices for the apartment they bragged about. Car loans on vehicles they flaunted across social media, their glossy photos hiding the truth of repossession warnings. And the wedding. My God, the wedding. Over $60,000 borrowed on credit. A celebration built not on love but on desperation. Each page felt like a betrayal. Each line item, another nail in the coffin of the boy I once knew. But it was the final section that hollowed me out. Daniel had hired a discreet investigator. For months, Brooke had been consulting lawyers who specialized in competency cases, so where adult children declared their parents unfit to manage their own affairs. They weren't just planning to take my condo, they were planning to strip me of everything: my rights, my dignity, my very identity. I closed the folder slowly, my chest tight but my resolve harder than ever. The chandelier light of that ballroom had exposed my humiliation. Now, these pages exposed their greed, and together, they forged the steel I would need. Brooke thought she had already won. She thought I was weak, but soon she would learn that a woman who has nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of opponent. Asterisk. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the leather folder spread across the coffee table like an open wound. The lamplight caught the edges of the papers, casting sharp shadows that made the numbers look like scars carved into my family's history. My heart ached, but beneath the ache, something new had taken root, a fire I hadn't felt in decades. They thought I was fragile. They thought I was old, foolish, easy to corner. But the truth was, they had underestimated the very woman who had built a life, brick by brick, beside a man who turned nothing into an empire. Robert used to say, invisible wealth is the safest kind. And tonight, for the first time, I understood his words as more than just philosophy. I wasn't weak. I had been playing possum. And now, it was time to rise. I pulled out a yellow notepad, the same kind I used when Robert and I would plan our finances in the early years. My pen trembled, not from fear, but from urgency, as I began to write: freeze all hidden financial support, secure legal guardianship over my own estate to block competency claims, contact Ali's people who had seen Brooke's cruelty with their own eyes, save every humiliating moment, every whisper, every bruise, because evidence is a weapon sharper than pride. I stared at the list, each bullet point glowing like a lantern in the dark. The first step was easy. I dialed Daniel again, my voice steady. Cut the transfers, every penny. Starting tonight. There was silence. Then his calm reply: it will hurt them immediately. Good, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. Let them feel hunger for once. Let them feel what it's like to depend on someone who suddenly decides enough is enough. The second step would take more courage. For weeks, Brooke had been planting seeds of doubt among family and neighbors, whispering about my supposed frailty, my supposed confusion. If they wanted a courtroom, then I would prepare for war. I called Dr. Harrison, my physician of 20 years. His deep voice reassured me instantly. Maggie, he said, I'll schedule full evaluations, physical, cognitive, everything. If anyone dares question your competence, they'll have medical proof staring them in the face. I thanked him, my throat tight with both relief and fury. By midnight, the plan was set. I sat back in my chair, staring at the folder of debts, the photos of Brooke flaunting borrowed luxury, the signed petitions from guests who had believed her lies. My chest tightened, but not with despair, with resolve. Brooke had dealt the first blow in a ballroom, under the glitter of chandelier. She wanted a spectacle. She would get one, but this time, the stage would be mine. As I turned off the lamp, the room fell into darkness, but my mind burned brighter than ever. The battle hadn't begun yet, but my first moves were in place, and when dawn came, I would no longer be the trembling woman picking up broken glasses. I would be the woman sharpening the shards into weapons. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The restaurant glowed with golden chandeliers and polished silverware, the kind of place Brooke loved to parade in. She had arranged the family dinner herself, a gathering meant to flaunt her new last name and tighten her grip over Noah. I sat across from them, the crisp linen tablecloth between us like a battlefield. Brooke's smile was sugar-coated venom. Maggie, I thought you'd be too tired for an evening out. At your age, late nights can be difficult. Her friends at the table laughed politely, not realizing they were applauding cruelty. I felt Noah shift uncomfortably beside her, but as always, he said nothing. I inhaled deeply, steadying the fire in my chest. The time for trembling was over. Tonight, I wouldn't play the frail widow. Tonight, I would test the sharpness of my new weapons. I lifted my wine glass, letting the light catch the rim, and said calmly, "Actually, Brooke, I've had more energy lately than ever. Planning keeps me young. You'd be surprised how much strength comes from finally setting boundaries." Her smile faltered, just for a second, a hairline crack in her porcelain mask. "What kind of planning?" one of her friends asked curiously. "Oh, just the usual," I said, keeping my tone light but my eyes fixed on Brooke. "Meeting with advisors, securing assets, making sure my affairs are in order, so no one misunderstands my capacity to manage them." The table fell silent. Brooke's fork clinked against her plate. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice was tighter now. "That's responsible of you, Maggie. Of course, Noah and I only worry about your well-being." "Well-being," I repeated, letting the word drip with irony. "Yes, like when you brought an appraiser to my condo without telling me, or when you suggested I move into a senior residence." Gasps circled the table. Brooke's friends looked at her, eyes widening, her cheeks flushed crimson. "That's not how it happened," she snapped, her composure cracking. I leaned forward, my voice steady but sharp. "Really, because my neighbor Joseph saw you, and I keep records, dates, times, names." The tension at the table thickened, heavy as storm clouds. Noah finally lifted his eyes, but the shame in them told me he knew the truth I was exposing. I sat back slowly, my hands calm on the tablecloth. "See, Brooke, I've been quiet for too long, but silence ends tonight." The room seemed to hold its breath. Brooke forced a brittle laugh, trying to recover, but the unease among her own circle betrayed her. For the first time, the narrative wasn't hers to control. As the waiter refilled our glasses, I let the pause linger, leaving her to squirm in the discomfort she had so often forced on me. The war had begun not in whispers, but in front of witnesses, and the first strike was mine. By the next morning, the whispers had already begun. I stepped out of my condo, the morning air cool against my cheeks, only to find Mrs. Carter, my neighbor from 2 doors down, staring at me with pity. She offered a brittle smile, the kind reserved for the sick or the broken. "Maggie," she said softly, "I heard you had an episode at the restaurant last night. You poor thing. It must be so hard, trying to keep up with everything at your age." Her words landed like tiny blades. An episode. I hadn't raised my voice. I had spoken facts, but Brooke had clearly moved fast, weaving her own story before mine could breathe. By the afternoon, Daniel called. His tone was clipped. "Margaret, I'm hearing things. Brooke's been speaking to people in Noah's circle, claiming you're confused, unstable, prone to outbursts in public." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "So she's planting the incompetence narrative." "Yes," he replied, "and she's clever. She's not saying it directly. She's concerned, playing the dutiful daughter-in-law who worries you're deteriorating." I pictured Brooke, her crocodile tears glistening under chandelier light, whispering in sympathetic tones about my supposed decline. She wasn't fighting me with fists or words anymore. She was waging war with perception. 2 days later, Joseph knocked on my door, his face stormy. "Aurora, you won't believe this," he said, using my name like a shield of loyalty. "A man came by yesterday, said he was surveying for building maintenance, but I saw him slip Brooke cash before he left. An hour later, I overheard him telling another neighbor that you'd been forgetting things lately, leaving your stove on. My stomach churned. Lies dressed as community gossip. Seeds planted in soil Brooke hoped would grow into legal ammunition. Noah visited that night. His shoulders slumped. His tie loosened as though life itself weighed too heavily. Mom, he began, not meeting my eyes. Brooke's just worried. She says you embarrassed yourself the other night. People noticed. Maybe you should let her help more. I studied his face, searching for the boy I had raised. But all I saw was a man drowning in borrowed lies. She's not helping you, Noah, I said quietly. She's burying me so she can bury you later. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Silence. Again, the weapon he always chose. By the week's end, the rumors had multiplied. A neighbor mentioned I'd been seen wandering the parking lot at midnight. Another swore I'd forgotten to pay utility bills. None of it true. But the more it spread, the less the truth seemed to matter. Brooke wasn't just humiliating me anymore. She was constructing a case, brick by poisoned brick. I stood at my window that night, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky. My reflection in the glass looked older, yes, but also sharper, more dangerous. If Brooke wanted a war of whispers, I would answer with thunder. By Friday evening, the walls of rumor had grown so thick around me that even the elevator ride in my own building felt suffocating. Neighbors glanced sideways, their eyes filled with quiet judgment. Each false whisper Brooke planted was sprouting into poisonous vines, but I was finished being strangled. I picked up the leather folder Daniel had given me and slipped it into my tote. Every page was a weapon: receipts, reports, signatures, photos. Tonight, I would choose my valley field. The opportunity came at a charity gala hosted by the city's community board. Brooke had ensured she and Noah would be front and center, basking in attention, painting themselves as a young couple devoted to family values. It was the perfect stage for her, but it would become mine. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the soft hum of violins. Brooke swept in like a queen, her sequined dress catching every glint of light. Noah followed, looking tired but obedient. I waited until after the mayor's toast, then rose from my table at the back, my cane tapping against the polished floor, each step deliberate, each breath steady. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying across the room more powerfully than I expected. Conversations hushed, faces turned. The spotlight, once hers, now belonged to me. "I've heard there's been some concern about my stability, about my memory, about my ability to manage my life." My gaze locked on Brooke's, her smile frozen in brittle porcelain. "So I thought perhaps we should clear the air, publicly." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Brooke's hand clutched Noah's arm, nails digging in. I opened the folder, sliding out a set of documents. "These," I said, holding them high, "are certified evaluations from Dr. Harrison, my physician of 20 years. Physical, cognitive, emotional, all signed, all sealed, all declaring me perfectly competent, clearer than some people half my age." A murmur swept across the room. I caught sight of Mrs. Carter, my neighbor, her cheeks reddening as she realized the gossip she'd swallowed was false. Brooke tried to laugh, the sound brittle. "Really, Maggie, this isn't." I cut her off, my voice steel. "And these," I pulled another page from the folder, "are debt records, credit cards, loans, eviction notices. The truth about who in this room is actually unstable." Noah's face drained of color. The documents fluttered in my hand like daggers. Each one pointed straight at Brooke's carefully crafted image. The silence was electric, the kind that comes before a storm. Some guests raised their phones, already recording. Others leaned forward, hungry for scandal. Brooke's composure cracked, her lips trembling. She opened her mouth to retort but found nothing to say. For the first time, her weapon gossip was turned against her. I closed the folder slowly, deliberately, then leaned on my cane. Appearances deceive, and so do people. I've lived long enough to know the difference. The crowd erupted, half in whispers, half in applause. Brooke's empire of lies had been pierced, and it was only the first strike. The night after the gala, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from friends, messages from strangers, even journalists fishing for a quote. My little speech had become gossip fodder, spreading across the city like wildfire. For a brief moment, I felt triumphant, but victories against vipers rarely last long. By Monday morning, Brooke struck back. An envelope slid under my door. Inside was a thick legal notice, pages of accusations, written in cold, black ink. Petition for evaluation of mental competency, filed by Noah Hughes and Brooke Hughes, my own son's name next to hers. I sank into my chair, the paper trembling in my hands. They were escalating. If the court ruled me incompetent, I'd lose control of everything: my conduct, my finances, my freedom. By noon, whispers became headlines. A local blog ran the story. Elderly widows, public outburst sparks concerned family seeks legal protection. The words cut deeper than any slap. Brooke had twisted my moment of strength into evidence of instability. I called Daniel immediately. His voice was calm but grave. "Margaret, she's playing dirty. She's hired Strauss and Klein." My stomach clenched. Strauss and Klein wasn't just any law firm. They specialized in high-profile estate disputes, ruthless in tearing reputations apart. If Brooke had secured them, she was planning a war of attrition. That evening, Joseph came by, his face pale. "Aurora," he said, "I overheard something you need to know. Brooke's been visiting neighbors again, offering favors, even money, if they'll testify you've been forgetful, unstable." My chest tightened. Lies were one thing, sworn statements were another. With enough signatures, Brooke's fiction could become the court's reality. 2 days later, I saw the proof at the grocery store. Mrs. Carter avoided my eyes. Mr. Lewis from the 4th floor muttered something about safety concerns. And then I saw Brooke herself, radiant as ever, whispering into a reporter's microphone outside the courthouse steps. "She's family," Brooke cooed, fake sorrow dripping from every word. "We love her, but she needs help. It breaks our hearts to take this step, but we can't watch her deteriorate." The cameras loved her. The public ate it up. Overnight, I went from victim to villain in the story Brooke scripted. That night, I stood at my window, the city lights blurring through the tears I refused to let fall. My own son's name on that petition burned in my mind, but grief soon hardened into steel. They wanted a legal war. Then, I would meet them in the courtroom, not as a trembling old woman, but as Maggie Hughes, the woman they had underestimated one last time. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and dust, a place where truths and lies, dressed in the same suit, waited to be judged. I sat at the defendant's table, hands folded neatly, my pearl necklace cooled against my skin. Across the aisle, Brooke glowed like she was attending a red carpet premiere, her lawyer Strauss standing tall beside her. Noah sat stiffly at her side, eyes hollow, his gaze fixed on the floor. "All rise," the bailiff called. When Judge Harper entered, silence fell heavy as iron. She was a stern woman in her 60s with eyes that missed nothing. My heart pounded, but I sat straighter, refusing to let Brooke see a tremor. Strauss began with polished venom. "Your Honor, we are here out of deep concern for Mrs. Margaret Hughes. Over the past months, her behavior has become erratic, unstable, even dangerous. My clients, Noah and Brooke Hughes, have reluctantly filed this petition to protect her well-being and the safety of those around her." I felt the words like darts, each one tipped with poison. Brooke lowered her gaze, as if in grief, but the corners of her mouth twitched in satisfaction. Then came the witnesses. First, Mrs. Carter shuffled nervously to the stand. She cleared her throat. I've seen Maggie forget simple things. Once she left her door unlocked all night, and she's been confused." My chest tightened. Lies rehearsed to sound like concern. Next, Mr. Lewis. His testimony was worse. "She wandered the parking lot at midnight, looking lost. I was afraid for her safety." Each false word stacked against me like bricks building a prison. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging crescents into my palms. Finally, Strauss pulled out a video clip, taken on someone's phone at the gala. The angle was skewed, catching only my raised voice but not Brooke's smirked. "See," Strauss said, unprovoked aggression. A public outburst. The judge's brow furrowed. For a moment, despair clawed at me. Then Daniel rose. Calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, may we enter Exhibit C into evidence?" He handed over Dr. Harrison's sealed evaluations, complete with cognitive tests, memory scores, physical exams. The seal of credibility gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and Daniel continued, "We have our own witnesses, Joseph Collins." Joseph stepped forward, steady as a rock, his voice cut clean. "I've lived next door to Maggie for 15 years. She's sharp, independent. The only confusion I've seen is from people trying to manipulate her." Then he delivered the blow. "I personally saw Brooke bring a real estate appraiser to Maggie's condo. I overheard her saying they'd move in once Maggie was out of the way." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Brooke's face drained of color. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Hughes, do you have anything to say before we reassess? I stood, my legs steady beneath me. Yes, Your Honor, I am not incompetent. I am a mother betrayed, and I am ready to prove it. The silence that followed was thunderous. For the first time, Brooke's mask cracked not just in front of friends, but before the law. The second day of testimony began under a sky heavy with gray clouds, as if even the weather sensed the storm about to break. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters crammed into the back row, neighbors whispering nervously. Brooke looked immaculate in a tailored suit, her smile brittle. Noah, pale and hollow-eyed, shifted in his chair like a man chained to a decision he regretted but could not undo. Strauss struck first. Your Honor, my clients only seek to protect Mrs. Hughes. But beyond her instability, there are questions about her finances, assets unaccounted for, unexplained wealth. She hides information, which further suggests confusion or deception. The bait was obvious. Strauss wanted to cast suspicion on me, to twist secrecy into madness. But Daniel rose, unflinching. Your Honor, the defense is prepared to disclose every detail, not confusion, not deception. Protection. He laid a thick binder on the judge's bench. These are certified bank statements, property deeds, investment records. For decades, Mrs. Hughes and her late husband managed a considerable portfolio but chose modest living to protect privacy. Every asset is documented, every figure accounted for. Judge Harper flipped through the papers, her sharp eyes narrowing. Impressive records. Very detailed. Daniel continued, his voice gaining momentum. And more importantly, these records prove something else. For the past 3 years, Mrs. Hughes has been the silent guarantor of her son and daughter-in-law's lifestyle. Credit card debts, covered by her transfers, rent, paid by her discreet deposits. Even this wedding, he paused, letting the weight of the words sink in, funded in large part by her hidden support. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Reporters' pens scratched furiously. Brooke's face turned the color of chalk. That's a lie, she hissed, but her voice cracked. Daniel lifted a final page, holding it high. And this is perhaps the most damning. A record of inquiries made by Noah Hughes himself, calls to banks and attorneys asking how to gain financial power of attorney over his mother, long before tonight. Long before any so-called decline. Noah's head snapped up, his face ashen. I didn't, but the judge's eyes were fixed on him, stern as stone. Mr. Hughes, did you or did you not make these inquiries? The silence stretched, suffocating. Finally, Noah slumped forward, his voice a whisper. Yes, I did. Gasps filled the room. Brooke turned on him, fury blazing. You fool! You weren't supposed to admit. Her words cut short as Strauss tugged her arm, but the damage was done. I sat perfectly still, my pulse steady. For the first time, Noah's betrayal was no longer whispered behind closed doors. It was carved into the official record, witnessed by all. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm, clear. This is not the confusion of an old woman, Your Honor. This is the greed of those who should have been my protectors. The judge's gavel struck once, echoing like thunder. This court will reassess for deliberation. But rest assured, the truth here is becoming painfully clear. As the courtroom emptied into a storm of flashing cameras and frantic whispers, I caught Noah's eyes. For a flicker of a moment, I saw not malice but shame raw and crushing, but it was too late. The son I had loved had already chosen his side, and the world had finally seen it. The final ruling came on a crisp autumn morning. The courtroom was packed, anticipation hanging in the air like static. Judge Harper's gavel struck once. After careful consideration of the evidence, she said firmly, this court finds that Mrs. Margaret Hughes is fully competent to manage her own affairs. The petition is denied. Applause erupted before the bailiff could call for order. Brooke's face collapsed into a mask of rage, her carefully polished veneer crumbling. Noah sat frozen, shame carved into his expression. For me, the sound of that gavel was not just legal victory, it was freedom. When the crowd dispersed, Joseph and Daniel flanked me like guardians. It's over, Joseph whispered. They can't touch you now, but I shook my head gently. No, it's only the beginning. This wasn't just about defending myself. It's about proving that silence has limits and dignity has a price no one else can set. That night, back in my condo, I stood at the window overlooking the city. The lights shimmered like promises against the dark. For the first time in years, I felt my breath come easily. The whispers, the humiliation, the betrayal, they no longer held me prisoner. I thought of Robert, his words echoing, "Invisible wealth gives you power." He had been right, but power meant nothing without courage to use it. And courage, I had finally learned, isn't about never being afraid. It's about standing tall when fear tries to choke you. In the weeks that followed, the story spread beyond courtrooms and gossip columns. Strangers wrote me letters. Seniors stopped me on the street, their eyes wet with gratitude. "You spoke for all of us," one woman told me. "You reminded us we're not invisible." Brooks' empire of lies collapsed. The law firm withdrew, reporters turned cold, and even her closest friends drifted away. Noah, he disappeared into silence. Perhaps one day he'll find his way back, but that choice is his alone. My heart mourns him, but it no longer chains me. I chose instead to build something new. With Daniel and Joseph's help, I founded the Hughes Foundation for Senior Dignity, a place where others like me could find resources, protection, and most of all hope. And now, to you, my dear listener, watching from your own living room, I leave this. Family is meant to protect, not exploit. Love is meant to lift, not chain. And dignity is not a gift others can grant, it is a right you must claim for yourself. If you are standing in the shadows of someone else's cruelty, let my story remind you, you are stronger than you believe. Set your boundaries, speak your truth, and never confuse kindness with weakness, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply say, enough. So tell me what part of my story touched you most. Leave it in the comments. And if you believe in dignity, in love, in second chances, share this video. Together, we can make sure no one is silenced again.